currently, a lot of governments are essentially dealing with the issues that the falling populations or falling birth rates are presenting by essentially mass immigration, and we've seen that in a number of countries, pretty much in most of the Europe. That is currently a massive issue in the UK, even though no politicians want to talk about it, or very few of them. But everyone can see that. So what I found really interesting, and I think it was one of the articles that you wrote, was we can already see how what does like multiculturalism essentially looks like on the streets of the Great Britain. And we are recording that on the morning after the Leeds riots, where we had London came to a stop because of the demonstration. We've had then riots in London, we had riots in Leeds. And to me, like that is just not the UK that I even recognize from 20 years ago. So when we are talking about continuing to solve the problem, the problem of falling birth rates with immigration, can you just give us a sense of the scale of the immigration that we would need to start employing over the next 10, 30 years to actually keep us where we are, sort of in terms of the labor?
Well, if you look at it comes back to the trilemma and the work we did for ARC. If you look at the current support ratio and you want to keep that, and it's already quite low, number of workers per retiree is lower than it was, and it's going to get lower. If we wanted to keep it where it is at the moment, which is on the low side anyway, and if we keep the current fertility rate, or we move to South Korean levels, and we are moving in that direction, we would need more than half the population, and maybe 60 or 70% of the population, to be first generation overseas immigrants towards the end of the century. And it's kind of a mathematical thing. If you're saying we're having fewer and fewer children, each cohort's declining, but we've got to keep the working age workforce there, then we just have to bring in ever larger rafts of people who then in turn get old, don't have many children, and eventually you'd be sucking in the whole planet. Now, that's never going to happen. So, first of all, I think there's a resistance, there's a reluctance to see a complete eclipse of the domestic culture. People come from different countries with different cultures, languages, religions. We live in a wonderful, rich, complex world of many cultures, but in a particular territory, it could potentially entirely lose its identity if it's saying, well, every generation we need, every year we need 1 or 2% of the population to come in to keep things stable. Over a few decades, it's a totally different country. And not everybody embraces that. Some people do embrace it, but not everybody. And I think we've got to destigmatize people who don't embrace it. We need to understand the consequences if we don't have larger families, either at the knock the economy takes and the shortage of labour or the mass immigration and change. But it goes beyond that. So we've had mass immigration from Ireland in the past. And of course, Irish people have fitted in very well. There was prejudice against the Irish and against Catholics. But the Irish but nevertheless, they fitted in well. I always say, in the 70s, we had the IRA bombing our cities. We had a prime minister called Callaghan and a chancellor of the Exchequer called Healy. Nobody even commented on that. I mean, of course, they were. Who cared whether Jim Callaghan's granny came from County Galway? I mean, it just wasn't an issue. So that shows how well people have integrated. And equally, people from Poland, I think, have integrated very well. And my own family comes largely from Germany, actually partly from what was Poland in the interwar years and is now Ukraine. And I feel I and my children are reasonably well integrated into the society. But neither Poland nor Ireland any longer has a high fertility rate. I mean, Britain benefited for generations from the Irish having large families and sending them over to the UK. It was, we then had it. Now, Poland and Ireland are both in different ways. And Ireland has a higher per capita GDP than Britain, and it has its own problems. But there's no huge economic incentive to go from Ireland to Britain anymore. There may be other reasons people go in both directions. Equally, from what I saw of Krakow 5 or 6 years ago, it's impressionistic, it's one part of the country. But the data also suggests not only are Polish people not having large families anymore, but there's not a huge, not the way there was 20 years ago, like, oh, I could work in London and send a bit of money home, and that will make a huge difference to the wage rate. So we're not that rich a country relative to other countries anymore. Other
Mm-hmm.
countries aren't having high fertility rate. So it's very arrogant to assume that forever we can just bring in all these people. We don't need to have our own children. Other people will do it for us. And then, there's another strand, which is where people are having larger families in very poor countries. They often have very poor education. If we bring them in at 20, it's only to do low value work. It's not necessarily enhancing the economy, it's depressing wages at the bottom end. And also where they are intelligent and successful and have got educations, is it not very immoral for us to say in Ghana, for example, we will let a lot of the medical people come in who are needed badly in Ghana, but we will choose to have them here. And then if they're lucky, they'll send some remissions back. That's the Ghanaian economy. Bear the kids, go through the birth pain, bring them up, spend a fortune in countries with limited capital, educating them. And then if they
Mm-hmm.
make the grade, we'll take them away. So I think a whole range of reasons why it's simply wrong, immoral, and impractical to say immigration is the answer.